Almost everybody has heard of the keto diet, the ketogenic diet, and it's mostly known maybe as a passing fad, a means of losing weight, but that's not all it is. The keto diet is very successful in removing those unwanted pounds, but during this process there's something quite profound happening to the very cells inside your body. This process is called ketosis, and it represents a revolution in health. It represents a revolution not only for preventing disease, but also for curing disease as well. In this course, you will learn what ketosis is and what happens in your body's cells when you're on the keto diet. You learn why the state of ketosis is very beneficial for preventing disease and also healing even severe conditions. You learn how to adapt your body to ketosis and which food groups to eat and in what quantities and proportions. You will also learn about intermittent fasting and how this promotes autophagy, which is how your body heals itself naturally. The course doesn't present a keto diet in detail. There are hundreds of resources on the internet where you can go and download a complete recipe list and a meal plan for 30 to 60 days. On completion of this course, you learn how to completely control your health naturally by measuring your blood glucose levels and your ketone levels, which are produced as a byproduct of ketosis, and learn how to maintain optimum health. You'll take control of your own health, live healthier, and live longer. Sign up now, and I'll see you inside. Let me give you a broad outline of the course before we move on to the detail. Keto is short for ketogenic. Anything that is ketogenic causes our body to be in a state of ketosis. Now we can put the body in a state of ketosis in one of two ways. First of all, we can fast. This means not eating at all for some days. And the second method is to choose carefully the kind of foods that we eat. The food that we eat is broken down into simpler molecules in our stomach, which are transported around the body by the blood. The body's cells absorb these molecules and break them down even further, creating energy in the process. Our bodies have around 47 trillion cells, and these cells are very flexible, they're very adaptive. Broadly speaking, they can burn two kinds of fuel, sugar or fat. Conventional wisdom tells us that fat is bad for us, but this is not strictly true. It depends also on the kind of fat and the proportions of the fat you eat compared to the other food groups. There are three major food groups: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Carbohydrates metabolize into sugar. In a later video, we'll take a look at why it's much more efficient and much healthier for our cells to burn fat than sugar. Latest research is showing a profound relationship between disease and what we eat. Paradoxically, the so-called balanced Western diet is detrimental to health, and in many cases actually causes disease. Such diseases include diabetes, Alzheimer's, and of course cancer. In a later video, we're going to look at this special case called cancer and how it relates to our diet. As many people have observed, ketosis does promote weight loss, and that in itself helps us to become healthier. But it's still possible to be thin and quite unhealthy at the same time. On top of this, the only way to lose weight while you're still eating a conventional Western diet is to severely restrict the calories. In fact, restricting them so much that the dieter is constantly hungry. Currently, there is an epidemic of very serious diseases. The latest research indicates that these diseases may well be caused by the very food that we eat. For thousands of years, getting our bodies into ketosis wasn't an issue. It wasn't a problem. Over millennia, before farming was industrialized, people ate whatever was in season. In the summer, there was an abundance of fruits, so our cells burned sugar. At the other extreme, in the winter, they ate mostly meat and animal fats, so the cells simply flipped over to burning fat. At any time of the year, there would probably be shortages of all kinds of foods. It's very probable that people didn't eat for 2 or 3 days before finding food or finding something they can kill to eat. This kind of enforced fasting causes the body to break down any stored fat and send it to the cells in order for them to make energy. So these are the two ways in which we can put our bodies into ketosis. We can either deprive it of food altogether for a few days, or we can eat the right food groups. In fact, the optimum path is to combine the two. In the rest of the course, we'll see how combining these two methods promotes optimal health. In the last video, I said that our human body cells can either burn sugar or fat for creating energy that we need. In this video, we're going to go a little bit deeper in what actually happens inside the cells. Inside each cell, there are 2,000 to 3,000 organelles called mitochondria, whose job it is to break down molecules of food to create the energy we need to live. You can think of them as an energy factory, an assembly line. Raw materials go into the cell by being absorbed through the cell's membrane, and energy is produced by the mitochondria. Actually, this process could be called a disassembly line because larger molecules are broken down into smaller ones for nutrients. This slide shows a very simplified representation of the process when a cell burns sugar. Cells can burn either sugar or fat, and they are very good at flipping from one to the other, which served our ancestors very well. When cells burn sugar, certain toxic byproducts are produced, namely lactate, acetate, ethanol, and acetaldehyde. Acid is also produced. Normally, the liver cleans out these toxins and they're eliminated from the body. Generations ago, the sugar-burning season would pass and the toxins would be eliminated more thoroughly during the season when the cells burn fat. However, if the body continues to use sugar in excessive amounts continuously, the waste byproducts accumulate and eventually damage the mitochondria by starving them of oxygen. The damaged mitochondria make less and less energy until they cannot function at all, and trigger inflammation and disease. This is an invisible process that seriously harms our health after decades of eating the wrong things. Now let's look at a cell metabolizing fat for energy. There are no toxic byproducts. It is simply a clean process. It is therefore much more efficient at creating energy. There are no waste products to overload the liver or to clog up the veins, arteries, and capillaries. We all have a choice about what we eat, but it's not so easy to make this choice if we don't have the correct information to guide us. In the next lecture, you will find that all foods are not what they seem. We'll look at the way that foods are presented in the supermarkets and what the labels tell us. In the last video, we learned that our bodies are much happier and we are healthier if our cells burn fat instead of sugar. General recommendations are that we can put our body in ketosis if we eat the food groups in the following proportions: 50% from fat, 30% from protein, and 20% from carbohydrates. These numbers aren't fixed, and they will fluctuate for each individual depending on their metabolism. The normal Western diet has the following recommended proportions: 50% from carbohydrates, 30% from protein, and just 20% or less from fat. There's obviously a big difference here, with the standard Western diet giving almost exactly the opposite proportions to those required for maximum health. So how did this occur? In the 70s, many Western countries adopted nutritional guidelines. In these guidelines, it was proposed to eat certain foods in these proportions. The proportions that we see on the slide, which are really exactly opposite to that required for maximum health. On the left, we have the standard food pyramid recommended by the West. This model very quickly became the mainstay of the dogma surrounding nutrition. A dogma is a prevailing accepted truth that is thought to be self-evident and is never really questioned. The first two levels are massively loaded with sugar. For carbohydrates in bread, cereals, potatoes, all metabolize into sugar. Recent research is showing us that overconsumption of sugar is directly responsible for illnesses such as diabetes and cancer. In effect, we are gradually poisoning ourselves from an early age, promoting addictions to foods that make us obese and create all kinds of illness. It's more correct to call these illnesses symptoms, because they are symptoms of something wrong with our body, the way that it's working. And the body is compensating the best way that it can by producing disease. The food pyramid for ketosis is very different and reflects the recommended portions of the food groups when following the keto diet. You may have heard of the keto diet, which is primarily promoted for profit as a weight loss regime. It does indeed promote weight loss, but its effect on the human body goes far beyond the physically visible. The end effect of the diet is that the body's cells burn predominantly fat, which doesn't produce waste products like sugar burning does. Waste products destroy mitochondria, promote inflammation, and cause disease. You need to become a food detective, in fact, and become more aware of what it says on the labels and what is inside the foods that we see on the supermarket shelves. Obviously, we need to steer clear of meat with hormones, plants with insecticide sprays, but there are also hidden dangers in many of the so-called healthy food packages that we buy every single day. The biggest part of the equation is to drastically reduce sugars and carbs. Carbohydrates metabolize into sugar, and overconsumption of either will ensure that our cells never burn fat, even when it's available. A vast amount of so-called healthy food is filled with carbohydrates and sugars. Over 75% of the foods that we see in our supermarkets are processed foods. But what does that mean? It means that the food industry, the food giants, create the foods out of other raw materials. During this process, additives are introduced to either preserve them or make them taste better. Over the last 75 years, food has been driven by profit. Processed foods are made to be purposefully addictive. The industry uses agents called repeat appeal agents, which means that you're addicted to the taste, the sugar, or other additives like monosodium glutamate, and you come back and you buy more. The food industry is required to identify all the ingredients on the food label. But unless you have a degree in biochemistry, it can be hard to find out exactly what is in the package. You need to understand the ingredients to know if the food is fit for ketosis or for general health. But the industry hides ingredients on the food label with deceptive names and technical terms. Fortunately, with a bit of knowledge, you can decipher the labels and find out exactly the correct nutrition that you need. Monosodium glutamate tricks our brain into thinking that we're eating something savory, something really nice tasting, which is obviously healthy. MSG has been linked to cardiovascular problems, and it also overexcites the neurons in the brain, leading to some forms of brain damage. In the 80s, the health impact was considered so severe that monosodium glutamate was removed from processed food. Or so we thought. The industry simply rename it and add it in other forms. Monosodium glutamate is produced during some manufacturing processes of certain ingredients that go into our food. Due to this bogus technicality, it doesn't have to be called MSG on the food labels. It's labeled as the original substance that was put into the food before it was processed. This means consumers have no idea that MSG is in the food they are eating. Any hydrolyzed protein, anything enzyme modified, anything protein fortified, calcium caseinate, calcium glutamate, glutamic acid, monopotassium glutamate, soy protein concentrate, soy sauce extract, textured protein, whey protein isolate, and yeast extract. These are all other names for MSG. Next time you're out shopping, take a look at a few labels and see how many you can spot. MSG isn't the only addictive substance added to processed foods. Sugar is another one that keeps people coming back for more. People are secretly addicted to sugar. Naturally, human beings are not greedy. We are simply addicted to the sugar that is put into our food without our knowledge. The food industry claims that it's consumer choice. We decide what we eat. But this would only be true if it was free choice, if we had all the information at hand. How are we meant to stay informed when food labeling purposefully hides sugar? For the success of ketosis and sticking to that keto diet, sugar is definitely off the menu. It would be good if every food package had a label saying, "This product is full of sugar," but it's really not like that. Ingredients are listed on the label in order of size. So the biggest ingredient is the first, and then the second is the next biggest. Sugar will often be listed multiple times. 3, 4, 5, or even more different types of sugar could be used in one product, and often are. Sugars are hidden under this long list of names you see on the screen. Manufacturers claim that sugar is required to make the food last longer and also to change the texture into something more edible. This is not true. Sugar is added to make us addicted to the food so that we buy more and we eat more. Unbiased research studies show that overconsumption of sugar is related to cancer, both creating cancer and promoting it when it arrives. Let's break down a typical food label that you'll find on a processed food package in the supermarket. Keep in mind that over 76% of all the processed foods you will find there have added sugars, and so are therefore not good for ketosis. Look at the serving size indicated on the package. A manufacturer may make this serving size unrealistically small so that it looks healthier. Very often you'll find that a serving size is not nearly enough, and we sometimes eat 2, 3, 4 times the amount recommended. Make sure the amount you eat if you buy this product is similar to the serving they suggest. The calorific value of a food is the energy released when it's burnt in a special oven in a laboratory. Your body is not an oven. It can be a useful measure, especially if you want to lose weight. But it's much better to use your own macro calculations, as we'll see in a later video. The percentage daily value is how much you are eating based on recommended daily guides. However, guidelines you find on the internet or on the label are heavily influenced by the food industry. Also keep in mind some saturated fats, specifically coconut, are great for you. The vitamins they recommend will help keep you alive for sure, but they may not help you thrive. Trans fats are much less healthy. Avoid these totally. You need cholesterol to make specific hormones, but there are natural sources like eggs, and these are much better than processed foods. Of course, you need to keep an eye on this if you already have raised cholesterol levels. Sodium or salt count is useful if you're on a low sodium diet, because high levels of salt can elevate your blood pressure. But sodium is definitely needed for the keto diet. Total carbohydrates is the most important bit of the label from a keto perspective, and the total is made up of several elements. Carbohydrates from fiber are good. They feed your intestinal bacteria and not you. They do not count as carbs on keto. You definitely want to avoid carbohydrates from sugar. There are a lot of carbs which are neither fiber or sugar, but they still count. These could be starch or other forms of carbohydrates. Very often, net carbohydrates doesn't appear on food labels as a figure, but it's this that you need to know. Take the total carbohydrates and subtract the carbs from fiber. We also need to keep track of protein when we're entering ketosis, and a keto diet indicates that we need to track this protein macro. For the keto diet, you need to be careful and avoid all sugars. So you need to learn to be a label detective. Or even better, avoid processed and packaged foods, and instead choose fresh food that doesn't need a label. Be especially careful when you're dealing with processed foods that are labeled as healthy or diet. Very often they're anything but. You need to use your newly found detective skills to find out exactly what's inside the food. To end this lecture, take a look at these ingredients for a favorite American snack called a Twinkie. See how much sugar, monosodium glutamate, and other additives you can find as a food detective. Whenever you eat, your stomach, with digestive juices and enzymes, breaks down the food into nutrients that your body can use. When you consume carbohydrates, these are broken down into sugars or glucose. Your body uses glucose to fuel your cells, and in turn, your cells, the mitochondria, the organelles inside your cells, create energy for us to live. So when glucose is produced, first of all, it goes into the bloodstream, and they say that the blood sugar or the glucose level of the blood rises. And this is where insulin comes into the picture. When your pancreas sees that the blood glucose levels are high, it creates and sends out insulin to balance them out again. Insulin is a hormone responsible for pushing the glucose out of your bloodstream and into your cells, where it can be converted into energy. This is what's known as insulin signaling. As your muscles and fat cells pick up the glucose, your blood sugar levels return to normal. Insulin usually does a pretty good job maintaining healthy blood sugar levels in most people. However, sometimes your cells stop responding to insulin and become what is known as insulin resistant. Insulin resistance is the root of many metabolic diseases, especially type 2 diabetes. If your cells in your muscles, in your liver and other organs stop accepting sugar, then the sugar levels will inevitably rise. The pancreas will try to make more and more insulin, but eventually this becomes very difficult. It becomes worn out. On top of this, because of an unhealthy diet with too many carbs, the pancreas themselves can become damaged, the very cells inside the pancreas, so they're not too efficient anyway. We arrive at a situation where we have high blood sugar levels and high insulin levels, and the doctor may diagnose you with type 2 diabetes. Doctors often refer to insulin resistance as pre-diabetes, because if nothing changes in your lifestyle or your diet, then eventually you will be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Having type 2 diabetes, high blood sugar and being insulin resistant has been correlated with very serious medical conditions, such as heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, gout, and fatty liver disease. These are some of the leading causes of death, not only in the US, but across the globe. For example, type 2 diabetes is responsible for approximately 30% of all cancers that are not smoking related. Most people don't even notice that they are insulin resistant, and some of the figures make interesting reading, and also the symptoms are generally not related to the disease. 24% of adults over 20 have it. It's prevalent in over 70% of obese or overweight women. 33% of obese kids and teens have insulin resistance. These symptoms you see on the screen are heavily associated with insulin resistance, and thereby may increase your risk of having type 1 or type 2 diabetes. You're always hungry with intense sugar cravings, and you have a feeling you can't eat enough carbs to feel satisfied. You gain weight easily and you can't seem to lose it, especially around your belly. If you carry a large amount of body weight in your stomach area, despite trying weight loss diets, insulin resistance may be the cause. You may have bloated, swollen fingers and ankles due to potassium and sodium imbalance. Skin tags, or dark discolored parts of the skin in the folds and creases of your neck, armpits, thighs and groin area are another symptom. Gum disease can also happen. Since insulin resistance gets worse with the more carbs that you eat, then ketosis may well be the answer for the vast majority of people who want to correct the situation. The keto diet is known for correcting insulin resistance. The average American eats between 235 and 350 grams of carbohydrates every single day. The more carbs you eat, then the greater the level of blood sugar. The greater the level of blood sugar, then the more insulin you have in your body. It's a vicious circle. The ketogenic diet is a high-fat, low-carb diet. Instead of eating 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, we restrict the intake to between 25 and 50. But how can the body survive on such a low carb limit? The answer lies in metabolic flexibility. Our body's cells are very flexible. They can either burn sugar in the form of glucose, or they can use ketones, which are a product of eating fat. The ketone supply for your body's cells can either come from stored fat within your body and you lose weight, or from fat that you eat. When you remove sugar and carbs from your diet, your body will use up all the extra glucose in your blood. You'll be able to reset your blood sugar levels and insulin levels, since all the extra sugar floating around in your blood will be gone after a few days on a very low-carb diet. As your body starts to run on ketones, it will make less insulin, because there is less glucose to handle. This will make your muscles and fat cells more responsive to insulin. That makes the keto diet the perfect insulin resistance antidote. Clinical research finds that a very low-carb, high-fat keto diet lowers fasting insulin levels. It normalizes blood sugar and improves insulin sensitivity. On top of this, it effectively aids weight loss much more than other low-fat diets. Insulin resistance, or prediabetes, is a very real problem at the moment. It's gaining epidemic proportions throughout Western civilization. This condition can easily be helped and reversed by the ketogenic diet. Just two basic changes in your lifestyle, namely adopting a ketogenic diet and exercising daily, will free you from the diseases that I just described. Use ketosis to battle insulin resistance and high blood glucose. The modern Western high-carb diet ensures that our insulin levels are kept continuously high. But there's another factor which ensures that they stay even higher. Human beings eat almost continuously. Rather than eat 3 meals a day, we snack in between several times. 3 solid meals a day should be enough to give us our daily nutritional needs. However, a sugar-rich diet keeps you hungry and often feeling the need to snack between meals. The fact is that most of us graze just like cattle, all through the day in fact. We might have breakfast, elevenses, lunch, mid-afternoon snack, an evening meal, a treat while watching TV, and maybe a little supper before sleeping. Every time you eat, there is a spike in insulin production, which means for most people it's constantly high. So not only is insulin high because of our high-carb Western diet, it keeps higher because of the way that we eat, because we graze throughout the day. Intermittent fasting just means that we don't eat between meals. It's as simple as that. However, this is a lot harder than it sounds, because a high-carb rich diet with lots of sugar makes us want to eat more and more. It keeps us wanting. The keto diet is based on high fat consumption and reduces the craving for carbs. The cells are quite happy burning fat, and insulin is created in just enough quantities to deal with the sugar resulting from the carbs contained in our 3 meals a day. This is a very healthy situation. Even if we reduce the carbs a little bit and remove sugar from our diet, intermittent fasting would give us a huge benefit in our overall condition of health. Eating the keto way is a great way to reduce those insulin spikes, particularly if we don't eat between meals. Insulin also has the effect of inhibiting ketone production, so it's directly acting against ketosis. Intermittent fasting isn't just about fasting between regular meals. It can be extended so that a meal can be skipped altogether. The longer the fast, the greater the benefits it brings. For example, if your evening meal was at 7 p.m. and you sleep until 7 a.m., then you have already fasted for 12 hours. Normally, we would eat breakfast and break the fast, the overnight fast. However, if we sleep until 7 a.m., we've already fasted for 12 hours. At the 12 hours fasting mark, interesting things begin to happen in your body. If you could wait until 1 p.m. to eat your next meal at lunchtime, then your body would experience autophagy, which is the subject of our next video. When we fast past the 12-hour mark, there are significant changes happening within our metabolism. The balance between ketone production, glucose, and other compounds is such that the body starts to promote its own healing. The chart shows that ketone production takes off at the 12-hour mark, so making more fuel available for the cells to create energy. At the same time, glucagon, a tissue repair hormone, also increases. Insulin drops to a new lower level as glucose falls. Over a 24-hour fasting period, ketone production continues to rise. We can see that when we wake in the morning and soon eat breakfast, we break the fast. which means that we stop the process called autophagy from just starting. Fasting for 18 hours, say from the evening meal to lunchtime the next day, is of great benefit. A 24-hour fast is even more effective because at the 16-hour mark, autophagy kicks in. When a cell burns sugar, certain toxic byproducts either hang around in the cells or are expelled into the bloodstream. In either case, they can cause problems. In and around the cell, they reduce the amount of oxygen available, which is essential for cell respiration. They also promote inflammation in soft tissues fed by the blood cells. Even a healthy cell can produce malformed DNA and other biocompounds that are simply no use at all. When the mitochondria become damaged because of a high-carb diet, they become even less efficient, creating more and more waste products. These waste products must be removed before they can cause damage. Fortunately, there's a natural process called autophagy which does exactly that. Autophagy literally means self-eating, and the mechanism was described by a Japanese researcher, Yoshimon Oshami, who won the Nobel Prize in 2016. Autophagy is triggered by fasting, so is very relevant to this lecture. When there isn't enough glucose or ketones to burn, our cells do two things. They burn stored fat and also digest our own biological waste, i.e., unfinished proteins and dead cell parts that are no longer needed. It's a great way to clean the body and make us healthier. Without autophagy, biological waste products are swept along the bloodstream and sometimes they stick on the arterial walls. They can be absorbed into the tissues, causing inflammation and other problems. The brain in particular is a kind of a garbage dump for unwanted waste products. These can cause Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, dementia and other problems with cognitive processes. The body's circulatory system is incredibly complex and contains about 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels. Over 30,000 kilometers of these are tiny capillaries, so small that a single blood cell must fold in two before passing through. It's very easy to see that unwanted waste products can cause problems in these narrow tubes by blocking them or making them much less efficient. Using fasting to induce autophagy is a very important part of changing over to a keto diet. In our normal way of eating, we really hardly ever bother to try and track whether we're eating too many carbs, fats or proteins. We try and eat a healthy diet, which is a balanced diet. But exactly what is that? When following the keto diet, we need to make sure that we're eating 50 grams or less of carbohydrates. Now, when we reduce our carbohydrates, we reduce the amount of sugar in the blood that the cells can use to make energy, because carbohydrates metabolize into sugar. At the same time, the cells look around for an alternative fuel because there's not enough sugar in the bloodstream. This alternative fuel comes in the form of ketones, which are created when we increase our fat intake. When starting out on the keto diet, it's a great idea to have some kind of tool to help us to track our fats, proteins and carbs. Chronometer, a free application online, is such a tool. It looks a little complicated, But initially you simply want to track your fats, proteins and carbs, which are known as macronutrients or macros. Click Settings and Profile and put in your body details, your weight, your height, and whether you're a man or a woman. Now scroll down and click Ketogenic under the Diet section. And under the targets, set Total Carbs and Ketogenic Calculator. The Relaxed regime is perfect for a beginner. When you choose Relaxed, you'll see that the system automatically sets 50 grams of carbs. Now let's go back to Diary and we can start putting some foods into the system. Click Add Food. Now I'm going to imagine that I'm going to eat breakfast. Putting different foods into the field above, into the pop-up window, automatically shows you the carb content, which is great for checking if foods are acceptable or not on the keto diet. Let's add bacon and see what the system says. We can see that bacon is high fat and low carb. It's a perfect keto food. So we'll add this. A fried egg goes with bacon, so I'll try that. Here again, it's high fat, relatively low carb, so I can add this. Normally I eat toast with bacon and egg, but when I add toast and look at the content, I can see that the carbs are much too high, so that is off the menu. Perhaps a sandwich, a bacon and egg sandwich. But here again, the carbohydrate content is much too high, so we can't eat this either. Even orange juice has a high carb content, so we have to choose another drink. I'd go for tea, unsweetened tea, and add that. I do like my tea sweet, but sugar is out of bounds because it's high carb. I'm going to add an alcohol sugar called xylitol. For something a little sweet after breakfast, I'm going to add raspberries with a little cream, some heavy whipping cream. Add the foods and you can instantly see the carbohydrate content for the meal. We just need to make sure that when we have our main meal and our evening meal, that the total carb content for the day is less than 50 grams. There are many other useful functions to explore, but tracking the macros is the basic requirement. After using Chronometer for 2 to 3 weeks, you'll find that it's not required anymore. You get to know which foods are keto or which are not. It's well known that ketosis is a great way to lose weight, but the effects are much more profound than this on our overall well-being and health. Researchers have found that ketosis can not only help prevent disease, but can even reverse and cure some quite serious diseases as well. Let's recap a little. It seems that medical health professionals have been approaching health problems from the wrong point of view. The afflictions that we commonly call disease, such as fatty liver, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, etc., are really symptoms of the root problem, which is known as metabolic syndrome. Our metabolism is being destroyed by the modern diet of processed foods rich in carbohydrates and very low in fat. Not only does ketosis prevent a disease from occurring, it's a great preventative measure, it can also cure some diseases. One researcher, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, devised an index to measure our metabolic health. It's called the Glucose Ketone Index, or GKI, and it's a way of determining how well our metabolism is fighting disease. Dr. Seyfried realized that the curative effects of ketosis are directly related to the ratio between the ketones and glucose level in the bloodstream. The normal glucose range for an average adult is 4 to 6 mmol per litre, which stands for millimoles per litre, and this tends to reduce on the keto diet. Ketones, on the other hand, rise, so there is a fluctuating relationship between the two. If the glucose reading measured in mmol per litre is divided by the level of ketones in the blood, the result is called the GKI. For most people, this is very high, as their ketone readings can be lower than 0.1. Blood glucose doesn't really get very high because insulin is produced to keep it within safe limits. So ketone levels become very important. Dr. Seyfried's research shows that a GKI, an index of less than 1, is very therapeutic for serious disease like cancer. But this extreme level of ketosis is very difficult to achieve and maintain. Fortunately, we don't need to go that far to maintain optimum health. If we draw a line representing GKI, at one end we have 0. Of course, this is impossible, but Dr. Seyfried's research indicates that an index less than 1 has a very high therapeutic impact on serious disease. An index between 2 and 3 is still highly therapeutic, and the metabolism is engaged in deep cleansing of cells and rolling back all kinds of disease, such as diabetes, and many others resulting from inflammations. A value between 3 and 9 is called nutritional ketosis, and is great for maintaining optimum health and preventing illness from occurring. A GKI over 9 means that the body is no longer in a state of ketosis. So we can see that our ketone level is only one part of the story. We also need to gauge and accurately measure our glucose levels and make sure that they're as low as they can be. In this way, the combination, the ratio between the two, is quite a reliable indication of overall health. Fortunately, electronic meters to measure glucose and ketones are readily available, and they are cheap and easy to use. Each tester comes with testing strips which can be bought separately. You simply push the strip into the slot at the top of the instrument and it self-activates. Next, prick the thumb or finger and apply a spot of blood to the end of the strip. Within a few seconds, your readings will be displayed, and you can calculate your GKI. Readings will fluctuate from day to day, and during the day. The best time to test is perhaps 3 to 4 hours after your meal or just before your next meal. A few days after starting the diet, you'll find that your ketone readings are quite high. But after 2 weeks or so, these readings reduce, simply because your cells prefer to burn fat instead of sugar. For the first 2 or 3 weeks of the diet, the cells are still burning sugar that is stored in your body. In general, over time, if your ketone reading is more than 0.5, then you're in ketosis at some level. The exact level is determined by the GKI, your glucose ketone index. So at the same time, you would take your blood glucose reading